The Parker estate had always been a place of sanctuary, or so I thought. Nestled at the end of a winding lane in a quiet suburb, the Victorian house stood as a monument to my parents' hard work. But lately, the air inside felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My mother, Martha, was fading. It wasn't a sudden drop, but a slow, agonizing erosion caused by a heart condition that made every staircase look like a mountain. My father, Arthur, was a man of iron who was finally starting to rust. His hands, once capable of building furniture from scratch, now shook when he poured his morning coffee. I moved back into my childhood guest room 3 months ago. I am 34, a freelance architect, which gave me the flexibility to be there. But I wasn't the only one who had returned to the nest. My younger brother, Daniel, and his wife, Sophie, had arrived shortly after me. Daniel had always been the golden boy, mostly because he knew how to polish his lies until they shone like truth. He had spent his 20s bouncing from one failed business venture to another, always asking for seed money that never grew into anything but debt. Sophie was his perfect match, beautiful, sharp-featured, and possessed of a chillingly calm demeanor. "We're here to help, Elena," Daniel had told me the day he moved in, his arm wrapped around Sophie. "You shouldn't have to carry the burden of mom and dad alone." But Daniel didn't do burdens. He didn't do laundry, he didn't do grocery shopping, and he certainly didn't do medical appointments. Instead, he spent his days working on his laptop and whispering with Sophie in the garden. The morning of the incident began with a deceptive peace. I woke up at 6 a.m. The sun was a pale orb hanging over the damp garden. I went downstairs, the floorboards groaning under my feet, a sound I usually found comforting, but today it felt like a warning. I began the breakfast ritual. It was the one time of the week we all sat together. I took pride in it. I cracked the eggs, the yellow yolks bright against the white ceramic. I fried the bacon until it was crisp, the scent filling the kitchen. Sophie came down around 7:30 a.m., wrapped in a silk robe that looked too expensive for someone who claimed to be broke. "My head is absolutely splitting." "Elena," she murmured, leaning against the counter, "I think I'll stay upstairs and rest. But you should definitely make your signature rib omelets for Arthur and Martha. You know how much they love your cooking." She smiled. It was a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Looking back, that was the first hook of the trap. She was establishing that I was the cook. I was the one in control of the food. "I'll handle it, Sophie," I said. "Go lie down." She disappeared upstairs. A few minutes later, Daniel drifted in. He looked refreshed, a contrast to the weary look he usually wore. "Morning, sis," he said. He was being too nice. He started helping me set the table, something he never did. He was whistling a low, tuneless melody. My parents came down slowly, arm in arm. We sat at the heavy oak table. I had placed 4 plates down. Mom, Dad, Daniel, and myself. Everything smells wonderful. "Elena," my father said, his voice raspy. "I'll get the juice," Daniel said, standing up. He walked toward the kitchen counter where the plates were waiting to be served. I don't know why I looked. Maybe it was the way his shoulders hunched, or the way he glanced back at the doorway leading to the stairs. It wasn't the look of a man getting juice. It was the look of a thief. I watched through the reflection in the glass cabinet. Daniel reached into his pocket. His movements were surgical. He pulled out a small, translucent packet. With a fleck of his wrist, he emptied a fine, grayish powder into the center of the 2 plates intended for our parents. He used a spoon to stir it into the eggs, his face a mask of intense concentration. My blood turned to ice. My heart didn't just beat. It hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Poison, the word echoed in my mind. He was killing them. Right here. In front of me. He turned around, the golden boy mask back in place. He carried a pitcher of orange juice and sat back down. "Eat up, everyone," Daniel said, his voice smooth as silk. "Before it gets cold." I looked at my parents. My mother was reaching for her fork. My father was smiling at Daniel, proud of his attentive son. If I screamed, he would dump the plates. He would hide the packet. It would be my word against his, and Daniel was a master of making me look like the unstable, jealous sister. I needed the evidence to stay on the plates. Oh, wait, I said, standing up abruptly. My voice sounded strange to my own ears tighter. What is it? Daniel asked, his eyes narrowing. I forgot the homemade peach jam Dad loves. It's in the cellar pantry. And Daniel, I think I left the stove burner on. Could you check it? It was a gamble. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Sure, as soon as he turned his back and stepped toward the stove. And as my parents looked toward the cellar door, I moved. My hands were shaking, but my movements were fast. I didn't just swap one plate. I rotated the entire table's arrangement under the guise of straightening the placemats. I slid the poison plates toward Daniel's seat and Sophie's empty chair. I moved the clean plates to my parents. I sat down just as Daniel turned back. Burners off, he said. Thanks, I whispered. Just then, the sound of footsteps came from the stairs. Sophie appeared, dressed now, her headache miraculously gone. Actually, the smell of Elena's cooking made me hungry. I think I'll join you, Daniel beamed. That's my girl. Sit down, honey. She sat in the chair I had prepared. She picked up the fork. I couldn't eat. I watched Sophie take a large bite of the omelet. She chewed, chatting about the weather. Daniel, too, began to eat his portion the other poison plate. I waited for the world to end out. The change was almost instantaneous. Sophie stopped mid-sentence. Her fork clattered onto the china. Her hand went to her throat, her eyes widening until the whites showed all around the pupils. Daniel ... double quotes she WHEEZ. Daniel, who had also taken several bites, suddenly gripped the edge of the table. His face didn't just go pale. It turned a sickly shade of gray-green. He tried to stand, but his knees buckled. Sophie, he gasped, but his voice was wet, distorted. Oh my God. My mother screamed. My father reached for the phone, his hands shaking so hard he dropped it. I stood back. I felt a cold, clinical detachment. I saw Daniel look at his plate, then at my parents' plates, then finally at me. In that moment, he saw the fire in my eyes. He realized the plates had been switched. He tried to point at me to accuse me, but the toxin was too fast. It was a respiratory paralytic. He slumped to the floor, clutching his stomach, his body racking with tremors. Sophie was already unconscious, her breathing shallow and ragged. The sirens were the only sound in the neighborhood. The paramedics were efficient, but I could tell by the looks on their faces that it was bad. What did they eat? The lead paramedic asked. Breakfast, I said, my voice steady. I made it. But Daniel and Sophie were the only ones who got sick. I saw the paramedics' eyes flick to me. The suspicion was there exactly where Daniel had intended it to be. At the hospital, the tension was a physical weight. My parents were in the chapel praying. I sat in the plastic chairs of the waiting room. Two detectives, Miller and Vance, approached me. Miss Parker, we have some questions about the meal you prepared. I understand, I said. But before you ask me anything, you should look at Daniel's jacket, the one he left on the kitchen chair. And you should check the security cameras I installed in the kitchen last month without telling the family. That was the lie that broke him. I hadn't actually installed cameras, but the threat of them made Daniel's lawyer crumble later. However, the police didn't need cameras. They found the packet in his pocket. Traces of aconitine, the queen of poisons. Sophie didn't survive the night. Her heart, already stressed by the poison, simply stopped. Daniel survived, but only because he had eaten less than she had, while he was in the ICU. Guarded by police, the digital forensics team cracked their phones. The messages were a horror story of greed. Sophie, if we do it Sunday, Elena will be the one who served them. The police will arrest her immediately. We get the house, the insurance, and we're clear. Daniel, I bought the powder. It's tasteless. I'll drop it in when she's distracted. Just make sure you stay upstairs until I give the signal. When the detectives showed these to my father, I thought his heart would break right there in the precinct. He wept not for his own life, but for the monster he had raised. The trial was a media circus. Daniel tried to claim I had poisoned everyone and he was just trying to protect our parents. But the evidence was a mountain he couldn't climb. The toxicology showed the poison was concentrated only on his and Sophie's plates. I took the stand on the third day. I looked my brother in the eye. "I saw you," I said, my voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "I saw you choose money over the lives of the people who gave you everything. I didn't switch those plates to kill Sophie. I switched them to save my mother and father. Whatever happened after that was your own handiwork." Daniel was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. 6 months later, the house is quiet again. The Sunday breakfasts have resumed, but the table feels too large now. There are only 3 of us. My mother's health has actually improved. The stress of Daniel's constant presence and his hidden malice had been a poison of its own. My father still stares at the empty chairs sometimes, but then he reaches out and takes my hand. I am the daughter who stayed. I am the sister who watched. Sometimes I sit in the kitchen alone and look at that oak table. I remember the clink of the spoon as Daniel stirred the powder. I remember the look on Sophie's face. People ask me if I feel guilty. I tell them no, because in that house of shadows, I learned a hard truth. Blood might make you family, but only love makes you kin. And Daniel had run out of love a long time ago.